Good afternoon. These introductions to these sessions usually start in a standard academic way. And now we've had a busy morning and a lunch, so we're all feeling a little lethargic, sleepy. So I'm going to start it in a different way. Welcome, welcome, welcome to this afternoon session of ESITIS. You made it, you're here, we're so glad to have you. And we've got a great program for you lined up this afternoon. Hege Grung from Oslo is here. Welcome her, yes. And I've known Hege for a number of years. She graced me with the task of copy editing her dissertation. Since then, I haven't gotten any work from her, so. But she's a erudite scholar. I enjoyed editing her dissertation. It was a good read. It was very informative, and very thoughtful, and she is also former president of the society since she stepped down at the last one in Bonn. And she did a great job, and she has published widely on gender issues and Muslims in a variety of journals and a variety of other publications. And she is now president of the Norwegian Association for Women's Rights. Yes. So I give you Hege.
Thank you so much, Henry. I feel I should give you something back for this, but I probably start on the lecture. But thank you. Yeah, it may be a bit challenging because a lot of it is in my head, so. Well, thank you for this opportunity to talk at the ESITIS conference. ESITIS has been very important for me as a scholar since the first time I attended one of these conferences. That was in Salzburg. That was 2009. And since that, I've been to every conference and got to know a lot of really interesting, nice people. So I just recommend the ESITIS conferences. So the lecture I'm presenting here today is on the request of the board of ESITIS. It has a very, very ambitious abstract and an even more ambitious title. And I will probably disappoint you. And now Nick will say this is a very Norwegian thing to say, but I am Norwegian. Because the announced exploration of established interreligious dialogue organizations in Europe, North America, and the Middle East regarding their financial and political strategies will be of a limited scope. I will present it, it will be very limited, okay? Because this research on such organizations are very scarce for some reason. And while I strongly encourage more research on such organizations and initiatives, I will only present some publicly accessible information, accessible on the web, that is. And the organizations I will present is KAISID, the Network for Religious and Traditional Peacemakers, based in Finland, I believe, the Adian Foundation, based in Lebanon, and Religions for Peace. These four I will touch into. And I have been looking for how they present their aims, how some of them present their understanding of dialogue, and then the finances, who is financing them, and also political network or embeddedness. But all this needs context, and I will structure my lecture in this way. Start with a little bit on language and concepts, and then a brief presentation of the one network and 3 NGOs, and then what is at stake and for whom. That is the underlying question here. And before I will go deeper into the specific language and concepts, I want to root this presentation in interreligious studies. This is a Society for Interreligious Studies, Intercultural Theology, but it's not given what we think about when we say interreligious studies. And I just heard a colleague here, Paul, I don't know where you are, yeah, there you are, saying it's not really a field. Did you say that? Not a discipline, exactly. Yeah, and I agree, but it is a field. And here we have two of the most, in my mind, most prominent scholars in interreligious studies trying to define the field. We have Oddbjørn Leirvik, also long-time member of ESITIS and one of the so-called funding fathers. That is relational. It recognizes the role of researchers as agents, agency being implicated in negotiations of power, and tackling the issue of normativity in a transparent way. And then we have Rachel Mikva, a prominent professor in Jewish studies in Chicago, saying that the field of interreligious studies entails critical analysis of the dynamic encounters, historical, contemporary, intentional and unintentional, embodied and imagined, congenial and conflictual of individuals and communities who orient around religion differently. It investigates the complex of personal, interpersonal, institutional and societal implications. So investigating the NGOs and networks of what we call geopolitical interfaith is clearly framed within both these descriptions or clarifications about interreligious studies, I think. Further on the language and concepts, and there's a typo in this slide. On the second bullet point, it should not be intercepting, it should be intersecting, okay? So please forgive me for that. There's some kind of autocorrect involved here somewhere. But organized interreligious dialogue is object for research. As we heard in the opening lecture by Nick, social scientists are actually doing research on interreligious dialogue, and we listen too little to them. And also, of course, interreligious studies. And religious NGOs, someone called them RNGO, religious NGOs. Encounters between religions and the international political / organizational landscape. It can be interreligious interfaith NGOs intersecting with diplomacy. And here we can talk about diplomacy 1.5 or 2.0. And I don't know how much you are familiar with this kind of language. But 1.5 diplomacy is a kind of diplomacy that's kind of half official. Okay, so there's a civil society, but there's governmental or state agents involved at some point, whereas the 2.7 diplomacy is much more independent from the official and the state actors. We find that more organizations define themselves as religious, spiritual, and faith-based. And this is according to Karsten Lehmann, who has written a book on religious NGOs. And then we can ask, how does this interreligious and interfaith NGOs impact our discourses on interreligious dialogue, and what are the underlying power structures? And Karsten Lehmann states in his book that he's very interested in the dynamics between the religious and the secular in this. And he says that social cultural constructions of the religions and the secular and the construction of the human rights discourses can construct unproductive biases. And he recommends, based on Linda Woodhead, a more dynamic production of these concepts through his study of these NGOs, that both religious and secular is an integral part of the milieu to be analyzed rather than detached standpoints from which it can be viewed. The dynamics of the discursive construction of these concepts, including the complexities of the semantic fields and the underlying power aspects. So it's dynamic, and we could have in our back of our head, can we say the same things about the concept interreligious and interreligious dialogue? In an article from 2017, I asked whether interreligious dialogue, evaluated as successful at one level, may provide obstacles for interreligious dialogue at another level. And I used the example of Kaisid in Vienna, I will come back in presenting that later, being detached from the Austrian context where it was actually based, with no contact with Austrian Muslims and Islamic organizations. And then the question comes, who represent interreligious dialogue and who is representing Islam in this case? So, this is just the intro, and then we go to the organizations or networks I will take a quick glance at, and I have 4 questions. I will not answer fully to all of them, but I ask, what are their explicit aims? How do they work, and who is paying? And what frames their work politically? So the first one is Kaisid, and I guess many of you have heard about it. Kaisid is a center that was originally established in Vienna, and the founding states were Saudi Arabia, Austria, and Spain, and the Holy See was included as an observer. And they are also working with well-established scholars in the field of interreligious studies and beyond. And here you can see their understanding of dialogue. This is all from their webpage. And I think this is very familiar, what is in this description for many of us, that it's not a simple conversation or debate. It's not about convincing others. And they say the aim of dialogue is to overcome misunderstandings and dispel stereotypes in order to promote mutual understanding. And then they are also stating their mission: we promote and employ interreligious dialogue to support conflict prevention and resolution, sustainable peace and social cohesion, to promote mutual respect and understanding among different religious and cultural groups, and to counteract the abuse of religion to justify oppression violence, and conflict. So this is their explicit aim. And this is an example from one of they have broad variety of different kind of work. This is a very accessible online course in Interreligious Dialogue that you can, for free, just attend. And this is described as a practice of using interreligious dialogue for building social cohesion, peace, and reconciliation. And this is to build the capacities of global leaders. And they are also stating the collaboration with institutions of higher education. This is more about the strategy. And here it states that CAICID is a reliable partner, I quote, to global actors such as UN entities and the African Union and the World Scout Organization. So this is part of their presentation. These are people involved in the governing of CAICID. And this is from the agreement between the CAICID and the Portuguese state, because CAICID has now moved from Vienna to Portugal, to Lisboa. And here, it's a different kind of language. This is also openly accessible at their webpage. Everything is openly accessible. And here you see the description of really not an NGO, but more of a diplomatic mission of another state. So there's immunity from legal processes and accorded to heads of diplomatic missions, and the property and income should be exempt from all direct taxes. I mean, this is the kind of language you use on foreign missions. Finances, you can see that they have quite a huge budget. It's 2022, 17.7 billion euros. And it comes from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It's fully financed by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I realize this is a very quick presentation. This is the network for religious and traditional peacemakers. And this is a different type of organization, not really, it's more like a traditional aid network, but with very stress on religious and traditional peacemakers, building bridges between grassroots peacemakers and global players, and want to engage religion in these. And here you can see the work streams. And the finances is mainly from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Finland, Finn Church Aid, the CAICID, and the Sultanate of Oman. And their web pages are very transparent. So there's even possible to file a complaint on their web page if you have a complaint about any of their stuff, or any of their work, or any of the formulations on their website. I found that very interesting. It's probably mirroring in practice in the Finnish legislation or help agencies. Okay. Adian, next organization. Adian means religions in Arabic. But they don't use the term religion in explaining who they are. It's very interesting. They say it's a foundation for diversity, solidarity, and human dignity. And they are based in Lebanon. Sorry. And they are based on individual. There's no religious traditions represented in Adian. It's individuals represented, but they do have a representation from many different religious traditions. And so it's not stating interreligious dialogue in words, but it's working with this in practice. They are focusing on inclusive citizenship and have a lot of different programs in doing this. And for those of you familiar with Janine Hill Fletcher's models of interreligious dialogue, it struck me that this may be an example of what she calls an activist dialogue. Whereas the former, the Kaisid, and also the next I will present, the Religions for Peace, are based on a parliamentary model of representation from religious communities. And that makes a huge difference. So, I think time is running very fast. I still have 15 minutes or something? Okay. So, Adian, I'm just including here as a recent speech from the leader, Naila Tabara, who was actually a presenter on the last ESITIS conference in Bonn. It would have been wonderful to have her here now, but they are overstretched with work. And she, in a speech she gave when Adian was celebrating the outgoing executive director in December last year, she emphasized Adian's unwavering commitment to upholding elevated principles without compromise or apathy, advocating fervently for human dignity, sanctity of life, diversity, solidarity, and the promotion of inclusive citizenship and freedom. I think this is a voice coming from Lebanon now, and I think you can see the reflection of the challenges there, showing how rooted Adian is in this particular context. And Adian says that they want to encourage religious actors to become models of religious social responsibility rather than voices for sectarian and victimization narratives. Transforms them into channels of awareness for those unreachable with their own communities, and that religion should be instrumentalized for the common good. This is from an article by Dao, 2022. The finances is openly listed in the annual report, and here you can see it's various international organizations and development programs funding the Adian. Religions for Peace, you probably all know about this. It's a 50-year-old organization working closely with the UN and globally. And their aims are respect, leverage the existing spiritual, moral, and social assets of the world's religions, build and or strengthen representative, sustainable, multi-religious mechanisms co-owned by religious institutions and communities, and partner local, national, and regional and global multi-religious structures. So this is clearly an organization that are working both with religious communities, with international structures, political structures, and governmental and intergovernmental civil society actors. Their finances, that was hard to find. It may be that some of you know more about this, But this is what I found on the website. The Multi-Religious Humanitarian Fund. And the Multi-Religious Humanitarian Fund has three main suppliers. It's very small there. You don't have to read it. It's there. If somebody's particularly interested, I can send you this PowerPoint afterwards, and then you can read it properly. So it is a JHR Foundation, the Fetzer Institute, and Riso Kosekai, and that can be written in many different ways. That's Japanese religious organizations. The two others are US philanthropists. So this is money coming from businesses, via philanthropists, that goes in funding this. Okay. So now I have presented these four. You probably made some thoughts. I don't know if you were surprised by anything. Maybe not. But going back to my first question, what is at stake here and for whom in the work and the kind of environment of these organizations? There's several differences and several things that are at stake for various people, because there's complex power structures to explore. There's a big variety in openness and transparency, and also inclusion and context sensitivity. So I think from what I've shown, you'll probably see that you could find traces of using interreligious dialogue or promoting religious pluralism as a political tool to format religion into moderate or good. This has been part of the US foreign policy for decades as a strategic move, and we have seen many different local interreligious structures established by that. Then we have the question relating to Kaisid and also to the social cohesion project in Singapore. I've forgotten the ICCS, yes. The article by Paul Hedges raising the question, is this dialogue washing of authoritarian regimes, these kind of interreligious dialogue endeavors? And I don't think that you think it is, just for the clarification. But you said in the article that you wanted to coin the term dialogue washing, and hereby I give you this. And then we have some research on organizations, European organizations that promote interreligious and interconfessional dialogue from Kuokkunen and Pasture. Maybe somebody knows them here. Maybe not. And they say that a criticism against these type of organizations is often that they can strengthen, can be used as instruments in identity politics, but that they find that it would not be surprising to some of us that have been working a lot with interreligious context that it rather generates new and hybrid transconvictional identities than actually making polarized and identity political struggles. So Then I want to end by three slides that are more evaluating. And I think what I really want to do here is trying to suggest some concepts that we can use when we evaluate this kind of work. Because many of us have been involved with these organizations, other organizations. We have been involved in many different ways to a kind of a political and international embeddedness of interreligious dialogue. And I think looking around us, how the world looks, this will not be a lesser challenge in the years to come. So here we need to be very aware, I think, about what we should use as tools and concepts to do research on this as scholars, but also when we go into this role of being scholar activists, we need to be very aware of what our obligations are. So, the first is gender justice. And the question, how is gender justice included? How is it framed? Is it at all part of the work that we are researching or engaged with? And I here want to use a very recent article by the former leader of the General Secretary for Religions for Peace, Asa Karam. And she says in an article that multi-faith interfaith is required for safeguarding of the common good, and that the global common good is essential for collective survival, and there's no way to get this without gender justice. Now there's 60 interfaith entities at the UN presently. 60. That's a lot. We know that religions in general hasn't been very concerned with gender justice. That was 30 minutes. Okay. And that gender justice framework needs to mitigate the harm of discriminatory, racist, and toxic practices by traditional global north philanthropists, institutions, and structures. That's what Asa Karam says. And I think in addition to the general challenge that religious traditions have with gender justice, we need to add this. Mitigate the harm of discriminatory, racist, and toxic practices by global north philanthropists. She doesn't give any examples of this in her article. I recommend the article. I find this very useful. And then the question is, to what extent do interreligious dialogue organizations do gender washing of religious traditions, of international organizations, and of nation states, and of the dialogue itself? And so this is also then, if we discuss, for instance, the Qaisid, if it's not really accurate to say this is dialogue washing of the Saudi regime, maybe it's gender washing of the Saudi regime, or maybe it's gender washing of the dialogue. And this goes also for the other organizations. So this is one of the things I want us to have in mind as a tool, ask for gender justice. This is the second. That is the concept of moral injury. And this is a concept that originated in psychology. It has been used in military chaplaincy to describe particular personal injury connected to the experience of failing to uphold personal or collective values and to compromise your own integrity or conscience. And in interreligious dialogues, I believe that moral injury may occur when participants experience neglect of important values to them, pressure to make unwanted compromises for the sake of dialogue, or that their integrity is being violated. And what we need to see is try to reflect over if the dialogues we study or take part in, do they have a high risk of participants being morally injured? Are we morally injured ourselves? And transparency, accountability, and ethical reflections on contributions to policy makings may reduce the risk of moral injury in interreligious NGOs, I claim. And these are also the academic values we are obliged to have our attention to as researchers and scholar activists. We need to keep these in mind. So gender justice, moral injury, and then my last slide is a question. Who is doing the dialogical labor? Who is doing the dialogical labor in these organizations? Who are carrying the burdens of translation, of establishing discourses, of criticizing the aims, and to evaluate based on dialogical values? Who is doing the dialogical labor to avoid and to heal moral injuries? This is a labor. Who is establishing the crucial questions? That is hard work. And then there's all this language and conceptual work along the way. Is this dialogue? Is this diplomacy? What are we doing? Who is paying? Who is deciding what we're doing? Thank you.